was just giving a little cue to record the talk. Sometimes talks that I don't think are really very good get recorded, and some of the ones I really like don't get recorded. And I never know what's going to happen, so I just wanted to be sure. Okay. Good evening, everyone. Wasn't that lovely? Being outside. Oh, what a beautiful season. So I titled this talk Aligning with Contingency. And aligning with whatever our circumstances are is really the art of living well, of using a life well and accurately, in keeping with what we really have to offer. So there's no end to contemplating this and what it involves. The composer and Zen adept John Cage has said, everyday life is more interesting than forms of celebration when we become aware of it, when our intentions go down to zero. Then the world is magical. That about sums it up. Everyday life is more interesting than forms of celebration. We may sit in zazen, completely wrapped up in our thinking and discomfort or whatever, and it's not interesting and it's painful. But as soon as we remember or we discover how to sit purely in the moment with nothing else going on, but being an open receptacle, then it's cream. It's pure cream. So everyday life is more interesting than forms of celebration when we become aware of it, when our intentions go down to zero. So when we have all of the intentions that we usually are run by and are operating according to our agendas and goals, which have their place, but not always. And it's lovely to discover the door to being released from them at times. Because when we are released from them, there is no end to what becomes available. So this is how this whole topic fits with Zen practice, because Zen is just what is, and it's always conditioned. Or what is always conditioned, and we always talk about causes and conditions are really what formulates our experience of this life. We're always in some kind of dynamic relationship to them when we're paying attention. When we're not, we're completely enslaved by them, in a way, to put it dramatically. If we're aware of conditions, we have room to be wised up by them. We have access to wisdom that is much greater than our own small, habitual designs of the world. We're always operating from a sense of intention. And rarely do we experience purposelessness. As a matter of fact, we disdain it, purposelessness, goallessness. Even when behavior doesn't make sense to us, when we look at it closely, we can see that it is based in our intentions. Actors, when preparing a role, a character, will look at what are the basic intentions of this character. And unless you're clear about that, you don't come across with a clear manifestation of a real person. So in a life of Zen practice, we look into our own. And sometimes we're surprised by what we discover. What arises in our life is not always aligned with our intentions. And this is where suffering and stress come up. We get used to being somewhat flexible because we don't know which circumstances we're going to be meeting. Some of us are more flexible than others. And sometimes, depending on our condition, we're more flexible than other times when we're tired, we're hungry, we're hurt. We tend to be less flexible. But we don't always know what the circumstances hold and what will grow out of these present circumstances. So sometimes we can see really clearly. But sometimes things come to us from left field. And we still have to deal with it. When all our guidance systems fail, what do? The guidance systems that our habits and our usual turns of mind and our beliefs are what we rely on usually. And sometimes they are not adequate. Well, mostly what we try to do immediately is bring things back into familiar patterns in our life. But this is not always possible. So what do we do then? When everything changes, what do we do then? It can be sudden, like the death of a partner, or the loss of a job unexpectedly, or a heart attack, right? Or it can be gradual, like aging, which at certain moments becomes very clear and profoundly can't argue with it. Everything becomes very different. So this is a long-winded way of talking about change and impermanence. This left field events are agents of impermanence and change. Actually, every moment is an agent of impermanence. So it's one reason why that is one of the basic teachings. It's one of the marks of existence. And it's also a great practice. If you haven't spent a day just saying, today I am going to notice impermanence. I'm going to study it. And it is really impressive when you just give over a full day and notice it. I mean, often we just pick it up, we notice. Of course, everything's impermanent, but to watch how profoundly true this is, every single microsecond of the day, is really sobering. Especially if you like things just so. Because every moment is an opportunity for things to change very suddenly, very unexpectedly. So even when we're getting back to this whole notion of intention, even when we're distracted and we're not really paying attention, we are aligning with our basic intentions. And this is one of the reasons to take up discerning and getting clear about our life vows. Why we're careful to look into what vows are guiding us. A vow is profound, subterranean intention that tracks us into certain directions and is always operating once the vow is taken, even when we forget about it. And these directions unfold, the directions that our life takes in relation to our vows unfold very mysteriously. So really what I want to tap and kind of hang out with all of you about is all of the very, very subterranean aspects of our life. Not the ordinary everyday behavioral because we usually talk about that and we're always practicing with that. But just what lies underneath all of that? And I'm particularly thinking about it because we're about to start a sesshin, where we really can begin to feel or hear the deep thunder underneath, the roiling that is going on all the time. This vow is not just personal. We inherit our vows. And I encourage you to think about, what vows have you inherited? I inherited my vow to awaken from parents who were artists, from my ancient Jewish heritage that wandered and was deeply spiritual, and which helped me spot my teachers in this life. And I also, it came into my vow through, this is one of the mysterious ways, through having asthma. So that from the time I was tiny, I developed a habit of being aware of my breath. I mean, it's not like I cultivated the habit, I just was aware of my breath. It was given, and that was part of my vow, given to me. So our vows are enacted through how we employ our body, speech, and mind. That's how we bring them into being, how we inhabit them. And precepts guide us in this and help us deal with all of the contingencies of our life. They condition the heart-mind, which is why we always encourage people to receive precepts. It's a really primary conditioning. They condition the heart, mind, and they help us to recognize the nature of the choices that we are presented with moment by moment. How we spend our time, how we use our life, what we say or don't say, how well we care for our bodies, our relationships, what work we do, what work we choose. So precepts help us approach any situation in a way that will be based in our intention, our deeper vow of harmlessness and doing good, which I assume most people here, everybody is aligned with that value, that intention. And then situations come along where all the normal guidance systems fail, that go beyond the usual and can't be negotiated or mediated in the usual ways. And this is when the deepest blessing of precepts and vow come through for us, beyond any sense of knowing what to do. We don't know what to do. I don't know about you, but most of the time I kind of know what to do. Most of us are pretty skillful at that. But things come along and I really don't know what to do. So knowing what to do. And the 3 pure precepts are really sure guides. They are refraining from doing harm, releasing all self-attachment. That's how we refrain from doing harm. Doing only good, taking selfless action, and doing good for others, embracing all things and conditions. Sounds really like, oh yeah, oh sure, of course. But we don't know, those are very general. They're not actually, they don't tell us what to do. That comes from who knows where, how to apply those precepts, huh? The least thing that they can do is to cause us, to help us pause, to ponder, rather than go into reaction and reactivity right away. When we don't know what to do, we tend, I think, to hesitate. And just give it a little time, if possible. my father always, one of the things he said all the time was, be good, do right. And I heard that from the time I had no idea what he was saying till the time, the last years of his life. Be good, do right. And it's not always easy to discern how to employ this directive, just like the pure precepts. But we do well to have the pure precepts in our pockets and have ready access to them. They are they're the specifics in a vow. A vow which is, in one of our chants we say, a bridge, a boat, a ship for all to cross the water, carrying us beyond specific goals and intentions and a self-centered view. Self-centered. I'm not talking about, oh, you're so selfish, but the view that is without even us. A vow to awaken aligns us with not knowing, aligns us with a universal, impersonal wisdom that is found in not knowing. When everything is turned upside down and the familiar is not available, the vow is a beacon. In times of emergencies or really odd contingencies, odd situations that come up. And this kind of wisdom can only be accessed through being aware of our own constructions, our own mental constructions. This practice that we do is very practical. The more we are aware of what our mind consists of, how it operates, what it includes and what it excludes from awareness, the more we're able to respond to the world wisely, with kindness and patience. The formations in a mind that knows is, the mind that knows is what we call the ego. The ego takes us along the road of the expected, the usual, and helps us know what to do according to what we already know. We certainly are not, the aspiration in all of this is not to get rid of the ego, although sometimes that is a misunderstanding about what Zen practice is about. We're not going to get rid of the ego. There's no need to do that. And also it's not possible. Not in any lasting way. If we do that, we're in big trouble making our way in this world, actually. So in emergencies and in profound cultural shifts, which we are in the midst of now, we may not know what a solution would be. And what we can rest in is faith mind, in realizing the open, empty nature of mind. And just being able to discern trickster energies, trickster appearances, things that are not what they seem, mysterious mists of serendipity or catastrophe. We all have that experience of kind of uncanny coincidences. And those are wonderful times to stop and really pay attention. What is appearing? What is being demonstrated here? Accidents that come along and precipitate some newness. That's a term in in philosophy these days, newness. But that's terrific, because it means it's not the usual and it's not what we're familiar with. It's something fresh. It's something that can be very helpful, but is new. And usually, newness reveals what has been here all along, but is only now showing itself. Because this whole teaching of causes and conditions, everything is conditioned. Except every once in a while, something comes from outer space, like the what is that? The Oumuamua, that ship that passed through the solar system and kept going. This was several years back. Are you familiar with that? And NASA never could account for it because it was moving. It wasn't behaving according to the physical laws that we are familiar with. And it was very odd. And it did seem to be a rock, very, very long. And it just passed through our solar system, and it just kept on going. There it is, you know. It really occurred. And every once in a while, something like that happens. And it's not causes and conditions, probably, but there are no conditions we know about. Or that experience closer to what we've all, I think everybody's had this, you're walking along in the woods, and there in the middle of space is a little leaf that's twisting around and around and around and around. And if you look closer, there's some kind of strand, probably a spider web or something that's doing it. So this is what happens in the experience of revelation or of awakening. Profound, we call it kensho. There are small kenshos where we go, oh, and we suddenly have an insight. But then there are experiences that completely blow us away. We have no way to describe them, to describe the experience in our usual ways. And so we are presented with the process of integrating these new conditions, this new experience. And there is in this integration profound happiness that comes with being able to simply let the world happen. Letting go of having to make the world. That's the meaning of the First Noble Truth, the truth of suffering. We may not, until we have a releasing experience in deep meditation, we may not recognize that we are constantly stressed with making a world. But when that mind ceases, when it quiets, when it stops, there is profound peace and happiness. Nothing need be done. Everything is complete the way that it is. Be it, you can be at home in the world happening as it is happening. And I'm talking about there's a very personal level of things. The current collective mystery, beyond how we change when we have big openings in our own mental stream. There's the collective, which we're all part of, is whether we can change collectively in this world and reorient the ship of the world that's heading toward an environmental disaster. And with it, all of the population shifts and the wars and starvation and all of that's unfolding. That's always going on. And then we also are working on a personal level. We each are personally reckoning with the conditions of the global life, the one life that we are part of and affected by and affect, as well as our individual life. We face conditions that are hard to integrate in our usual ways, such as a natural disaster or a bitter relationship that's more bitter than the usual, where there is no easy solution, or a visitor from outer space, or a terminal diagnosis. And we are shifted and left adrift and reminded that many conditions are hidden from view until some random force operates on them. Some chance encounter or some unintegrated energy comes along and shakes our world. I remember, and maybe some of you have had this experience too, when I first started meditating, I was like, oh, this is wonderful. And then I started having dreams of thieves and murderers and just dark, dark, dark dreams. You know, in deep caves with odd people and all of that. And it really was the beginning of coming into conscious awareness of all the energies that I had always kept down in myself. And all of the situations that I never really sorted through. Anybody have those experiences after you started meditating? Or was that just me? I see a few nods. That's important to know. It's important to know those energies and to integrate them, not to act them out, but they are important information. They're part of the whole world that is deeply involved in either helping the vow, helping us to wake up, or confusing matters. So this quote that I started with, everyday life is more interesting than forms of celebration when we become aware of it, when our intentions go down to zero. So going down to zero is what we come to in Zazen, where we are not making the world, we are just sitting and breathing. When I came across this quote, I immediately was reminded of the practice of listening to sound. Listening to sound when our intentions go down to zero. The world doesn't emanate from our intentions when we're sitting there and listening to sound. This soundscape, which is always operating, even when we're not aware of it, it's always right here. And it's a very mild practice, as actually Zazen is a very mild practice. But it can be like thunder and lightning to our habitual assumptions about what makes us up, right? It's a very mild practice, listening to sound. And we notice when we listen to sound that the world is already happening in us and around us. Sound is happening through our own sensorium, and we begin to look at what is inside and what is outside without having to know. And what the sound has little to do with our own intention. It has nothing to do with our own intention. We talk about causes and conditions as the source of every moment. Listening to sound manifests the current conditions. It is one face of the current conditions, which we discover beyond the natural, the usual sieve of our habitual intention and attention. Because chance events circumvent intention. And listening to sound is just one chance event after another. Whether it itself is produced by conditions, of course, but our experience of it, independent of us. So let's listen. Just listen. Close your eyes and just listen. Everything qualifies in its own way, so anything that you hear This is a purposeless practice. Includes any and all sound. Breath, passing traffic, any creaking in the room, drone of a machine. What about the sound of roof brain chatter, any kind of internal chatter, any thinking? What is the sound of a thought? And it also includes the steady high tone of our own blood coursing through our veins, which we call tinnitus. So listening to sound includes sudden sounds, steady sounds, intermittent sounds. Is there ever just silence? It's a terrific practice. It's everywhere, any time of day, anywhere that you are. You just stop and listen. It's one of the ways that we integrate practice into our daily life, because you can do it anywhere. Nobody knows you're doing it. It's particularly wonderful when you're in a noisy place. It's particularly wonderful when you're in a quiet place, or when you're in an in-between place, when you're in nature, or when you're in the computer hardware room. Any random moment. It's very potent, this purposeless listening. So the intention, my intention in this talk is to leave you with a reminder to listen. When wholly taken up with listening, we can't miss the truth of no self. It's really obvious. The world beyond our own needs and our own selectivity, beyond our own narration. We don't have to understand anything when listening. We don't have to know anything. We become so sensitized that we notice what is new. And when all our normal guidance systems fail, we have some innate faith that this too is part of the scape, the human scape, the world scape, which will come forward in its own way, and we will learn how to align with it. It's part of this great faith that we talk about, learning, gaining confidence in our ability to align with whatever comes along and not come into opposition, but also know the wisdom of being able just to stop. May we all practice well.